One of the reasons 95% or more people fail to lose weight is because they straight up stop trying. About 2, 3 weeks in, maybe, they just bail on the whole process. So arguably, one of the most important things that you need to figure out if you've got a lot of weight to lose is how to be consistent. What are the freaking secrets of consistency so that you can stay in the game long enough to actually see the results happen? Lucky for you, that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. And who am I, you might ask? Well, I'll be happy to tell you. My name is Heather Schucker. I am a nurse practitioner turned weight loss coach. I personally lost 80 pounds and have kept it off for more than 2 years. And so I have kind of cracked the code on this thing, and I am doing my best to share with you what I know about it. First of all, let's talk about sustainability, meaning, are you able to keep doing what you've decided to try to do for your weight loss? Now, there's a through line in the weight loss space where people talk a lot about whether or not something is sustainable. Like when some people recommend that you give up some highly problematic foods, the foods that are actually causing you to gain weight, just like give them up. You'll hear people say, well, that's not sustainable. You can't do that. It's not sustainable. And honestly, I think that's one of the most dismissive, disempowering things that you can say to somebody. I wonder how many people out there try to do just that. They try to actually stop eating the foods that they know that are causing them to gain weight. And then when they fail in 2 to 3 weeks to keep going, they're like, well, the experts did say that it was unsustainable, so I guess I just can't. Oh my God. Let me just tell you, as a self-proclaimed expert, yes, you can. That is exactly one of the things that is necessary if you want to lose and sustain weight loss. You have got to change the way that you eat on a consistent basis. It's by definition what's causing the problem and your salvation. It's the way out. And look, I get it. I know it's not easy to give up the problematic things that are causing us to have extra weight on our body. They're highly addictive. And part of the reason that I was able to kind of figure out my own situation when it comes to weight loss is because I was working in the addiction space and I saw how many kind of similarities there were between people that were addicted to things like heroin and cocaine and alcohol and my addiction to certain types of foods. And how disempowering do you think it would be in that space if we were to tell people that were addicted to alcohol or heroin, well, it's just not sustainable for you to just give that up and stop doing that as often as you're doing it. Right? That would be terrible, which isn't to say that people don't relapse, that there's not a lot of, kind of falling down and getting back up in that arena. That's just the way it is when it comes to addiction. That's just the way it is when it comes to weight loss too. And that's why that parallel is so significant. So yeah, there are a whole lot of foods that if we eat them in the quantities that we've been eating them, they're going to keep weight on us. It's going to be really hard to lose weight. So we've got to cut back or eliminate those foods in our diet, which is hard. We are in some cases, somewhat addicted to those foods. So much like people trying to give up substances, we're going to fall down a few times. We're going to have more than we want a few times. And we just got to get back up and keep on trying. That's part of this process. That is part of consistency. Recognizing that failure and, missteps are baked into the process. And just like there are absolutely plenty of examples of people that are able to kick those highly addictive substances like heroin and alcohol, there are also people that have been able to addict those highly addictive foods like sugar and refined grains. You don't want to confuse the idea that people can't, as in are unable to sustain dietary changes, with the idea that people just don't, right? Yes, it's very common that people don't sustain their dietary changes. Most people don't. 95% or more people don't. But that doesn't mean that they can't. In fact, the people that are successful in their weight loss are the ones that could. And if you want to be one of the people that are successful with weight loss, it's really important that you don't underestimate the fact that you can be one of the ones that can too. So let's talk about sustainability from a different aspect, because a lot of times the reason people are saying that's not sustainable is because when you go from the standard American diet, eating, all the stuff, and try to go to a very strict diet, like a ketogenic diet or a really low carb diet, then that leap from where you are to the, that strict diet is too big. Right? It is too big of a jump. And that the size of that jump and how difficult it is to make such a big change all in one leap, that's what people are talking about when they say that it's not sustainable. Doing something overwhelmingly large and day after day after day on a dime is really tough. So if you want to improve the likelihood that what you're doing is more sustainable, the key is not, I can't do that. The key is, that's where I want to go. What little step can I take? The key is starting way smaller than going all in. Going all in doesn't seem to work, right? That's how people burn out and quit so quickly. The people that are more likely to be successful are the people that make incremental changes that are doable, that, they're going from over here to over here instead of from over here all the way to over here. You know what I'm saying? So that little bit of change feels comfortable. It feels doable. It feels like you're making change with some level of ease to it. It's not an overwhelming burden that is on top of the rest of all of the stress that you've got going on in your life. And it just feels overwhelming. It feels like too much. And so you bail. All right. So what does this look like in real life? Well, for example, if you have decided that you want to get fit and you join the gym, an unsustainable approach would be, even if you haven't been exercising, for months, you go to the gym, you get on the treadmill for an hour and you run as full out as you possibly can. And then you go to all the machines and lift the heaviest possible weights that you can stand. And then you can't walk for 4 days, right? That is not a sustainable approach. And you know that to be true. You know that the better, way to ease yourself back into fitness is to start small. You might get on the treadmill for 15 minutes at a walking pace. You might get yourself acclimated to a few of the machines and establish what your baseline strength is, right? We've been told that. And we know that that's, what we're supposed to do from like the physical standpoint. But a lot of times we don't do that when it comes to making dietary changes. We go from eating all of this chaos and then trying to eat the most healthy foods possible. And you just fizzle out after a couple weeks because it's so different from your regular routine. Just like when we join the gym and decide to start up a fitness program, we need to start smaller if we want it to be sustainable. What does that look like in practical terms when it comes to diet? Well, if you're used to eating the standard American diet and you're drinking calories and you're doing fast food frequently and you're eating a lot of bread and pasta and things like that, it's a matter of taking a look at things and seeing where you can start to cut back or seeing where you can eliminate snacking, right? Pick some element that you can work on that feels doable and manageable. Give yourself time to work on that before you progress to the next step. That's what we mean when we're talking about sustainability. The other piece to that is a lot of times when people are starting out a weight loss journey, they want to change a whole lot of things at once, not just their diet. They're thinking, okay, well, if I want to lose weight, I need to change my diet and I need to start working out. And if they're into intermittent fasting, I need to do that too. And I need to work on my mindset and I need to work on meditation and I need to, right? They have this laundry list of things, all of which takes applied effort and attention and mental energy to do. And they think that they can just add all of those habits, all of those new lifestyle changes in at once. Not sustainable. Not because you can't eventually get to the point where you're doing all of those things, but trying to do them all at once doesn't seem to be very sustainable. So pick one. You can pick your diet, you can pick fitness, you can pick meditation, you can pick some other stress management strategy, you can pick intermittent fasting. It's just really difficult to pick everything all at once and work on everything all at once. Another piece of consistency that people stumble on is they become inflexible. They get fixated on perfectionism and start having this all or nothing thinking. So, in my example of people trying to change their diet, right? So, you've got people that are eating the standard American diet. They realize that it's putting weight on them. They may have gotten the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, and they're like, oh crap, I really want to change this. I'm going to go ketogenic, right? From here all the way over to here. And then they decide, okay, well, I'm not going to eat any sugar or any grains. I'm not going to drink soda anymore, all the things. And they try to do that all in one fell swoop. But then if invariably they aren't able to do that, and one of those foods that they're really used to having, finds its way into their mouth, they're like, oh, I blew it. I messed it up. Might as well go eat a pint of ice cream. Might as well go through drive-through. Might as well, right? The idea that if I'm not perfect, then I've failed, so it doesn't matter, is another thing that really gets in the way. A big part of consistency is accepting that you are not going to do this perfectly. Newsflash, you are not perfect. I am not perfect. I'm not claiming it either. And I didn't have to be to lose my weight. So you don't have to be to lose your weight. Isn't that exciting? That's not a necessary element of it. But you got to keep going in order to lose the weight. And the best way to keep going is that when those failures happen, which they absolutely will, you just duck and weave. You move around them. You accept, yeah, I'm not going to do this perfectly. Of course not. That's an unrealistic expectation. I am not going to completely change my diet on a dime and keep it that way consistently through holidays, vacations, birthdays, funerals, weddings, right? Office parties. I'm not going to perfectly do everything from this day forward. And accepting that means that when that little slip up or when that, food makes its way, yeah, okay, it did, right? I'm human. Of course, I'm going to, not be able to change things perfectly fresh out of the gate. I'm not going to completely be able to flip a switch and change everything about how I'm doing it. If you could do that, you would have already. If it was just a matter of flipping a switch, nobody would have a weight problem. Nobody can just flip that switch. All of us have to make iterative changes, little tiny kind of notches in going from eating a crap diet that had us obese and pre-diabetic in my case to a more reasonable whole food diet that keeps the weight a little bit more under control, more stable, which isn't to say that, at least for me, no crap ever seeps its way back into my body. It does. I'm human. And it does for a lot of people that are able to maintain a healthy weight. So we don't have to be perfect even after we've lost the weight, and neither do you. So you might be thinking, okay, Heather, all right, I got to start small. I got to be flexible and accept the fact that I'm going to make some mistakes along the way. Not that they're mistakes, they're just learning opportunities along the way. But how do I keep going even though I just don't want to? Right? That's a really common thing that I hear people say. Like, I just lost my motivation. I just don't want to anymore. I'm going to give you some bad news about motivation. It doesn't stick around. It just doesn't. Nobody stays motivated to not eat really yummy food that they've always loved eating. Of course not. That feeling, that gung-ho feeling that, I can do this. I got this. I'm so excited. I'm going to reach my goals. A lot of people do quit because that feeling goes away and they think it's a necessary component to change their diet, change their lifestyle, start an exercise program. Let me let you in on a little secret. It is not a necessary component. You don't need to feel motivated to do the things that it takes to lose weight. You can be consistent without wanting to be, right? Without feeling like it. You do the things whether you feel like doing it or not. And I know that you're able to do that. Let me give you an example. Have you ever woken up to the alarm and you're about to reach over and hit snooze again, but you realize you've already snoozed through the possibility that you can take a shower. And if you hit snooze one more time, you're going to be late for work, or at the very least, you're not going to be able to get your coffee in before you go to work. And you don't want to go at all. You don't want to get up at all, but you do. You get up, you get your act together, and you go to work. You don't feel like it. You don't want to. You're not motivated. You do it anyway. That's what I'm talking about. That's what this whole process takes. It takes that kind of energy, that I'm showing up to work even if I don't feel like it energy. And when it comes to work, I think the reason, you know why people go to work even if they don't feel like it, because they got bills to pay. They got kids depending on them, right? You've got responsibilities. But for some reason, we don't have that same energy when it comes to our health, because it doesn't feel as pressing, even though arguably it's more important. Another example, if you don't work outside the home, is if you have a baby and that baby is crying in the middle of the night to be fed or changed. You do not want to get up and get out of that bed and deal with that baby, but you do. You don't want to, you do it anyway. You're not motivated to, you do it anyway. There are so many examples of things that we don't feel like doing that we do anyway. And when it comes to the weight loss journey, that's what it takes. It takes a whole lot of, okay, I get it. You don't feel like it. Do it anyway. Right? If you talk to elite athletes or runners, right, and ask them, did you feel motivated every single morning when that alarm went off at 5:00 in the winter and it was dark outside to go, run for 10 miles? No, they didn't. I can answer that question. They don't always feel like, oh yeah, I can't wait, but they do it anyway. That's what you got to do. I will say this though. One of the reasons that they are able to do that they do get out of bed and get their running shoes on, or one of the reasons you get up and you go to work even if you don't feel like it, is because that is your routine. That is your pattern. That is your habit. And a lot of it you don't even have to think about doing. You just do it. And that's where you want your weight loss journey to get. In the beginning, it requires so much attention and effort to change your behavior into the new way of being, but it doesn't stay that way. You don't have to, focus on every single decision with the same amount of energy all the way through the journey. It does get easier. It does get more automated, just like getting up and going to work, where you're halfway to work, you don't even remember getting in the car, right? It's just part of what you're doing. People that exercise regularly find themselves at the gym. They barely remember how they got there. It's the same kind of thing. You get yourself on a new autopilot. The problem is that you've been on this old autopilot of how you were living for the past however many decades. And now you got to get on this new autopilot. And that is not easy. That process, that going from the old autopilot to the new autopilot, that right there is habit change. That's that process of doing those tiny small things that I was talking about earlier when it comes to sustainability, and celebrating them as you do them so that you feel some psychological momentum to keep doing them. If every time you get up and you go to the gym and you're on that treadmill for 15 minutes, you're like, yes, and you give yourself a gold star, or you put a green check on your habit tracker or whatever, that becomes something that you crave. That reinforcement becomes something that you look forward to. And so you're more likely to keep doing those things. I am a huge fan of Atomic Habits by James Clear. I highly recommend you read that. I recommend that you've probably read enough diet books. You don't need to read those anymore. You know what you need to do. Now you need to figure out how to do it. And how you do it is through habit change. So reading habit change books is probably a better way to spend your time at this point than reading more diet books. You got the general idea. Eat whole foods, right? There you go. There's the diet for you. If it has a mother or it grows outside, eat that. Okay. If it comes from a factory, try to avoid it. There you go. There's your diet plan. In the meantime, how do you get yourself from eating the crap you're eating now to eating that? habit change. And when you have a big weight loss goal, like say you've got 100 pounds to lose, it is more important that you celebrate those habits, those inputs that you do that is going to move you toward that weight loss goal than for you to wait until you've lost a certain amount of weight to celebrate, right? A really common thing that people do is, I've lost 5 pounds, I'm going to celebrate, or 10 pounds or whatever. And the scale goal becomes the reason for celebrating. Here's the problem with that. We don't have as much control over the scale as we like to think that we do. Our bodies can manipulate our hormones and our metabolism in such a way that even if we're doing everything right, that scale might not change at the same rate in which we are changing our lifestyle pattern. So depending on that to be the only feedback you get as to whether or not you're doing the right thing can be really defeating, and is often the case. So if you're doing, like you're changing your diet, you're going to the gym, you're doing all this stuff, the scale's not moving, then it's demoralizing. And you're like, well, no, it's not working. Why do I want to keep doing it? Because here's the thing. Eventually that scale's going to move. If you go from a diet that's high in refined carbohydrates, grains, and sugars, if you're drinking soda, if you're drinking a lot, or you're eating a lot of fast food, and you move to a whole food diet, if you go from sitting on the couch and you move from going for a walk, 20, 30 minutes every day, eventually that scale will move. It just will. It might not go as fast as you want it to, but even if it really kind of stays at a snail's pace, you're getting healthier. You know that you are, right? Just hearing me say that, you know that eating crap and sitting down versus eating healthy and moving are going to make some changes in your body. And so celebrating those changes and what you absolutely have control over is the secret. That's the whole secret to maintaining consistency, is showing up for yourself. Maybe not seeing the rewards right away, maybe not seeing the rewards for months in the case of some people who have severe insulin resistance, but still being willing to be like, all right, I might not be seeing it. I know good things are happening, and I know that nothing good will happen if I do nothing. So even if it's not showing up on the scale, it's better to do this than to do nothing. And the last thing I'm going to say about consistency is support. You are so much more likely to stick to something that you're doing with somebody else. So if you have a partner, a friend, a group that you can join that's doing what you want to do, you're more likely to do that thing. If you hire a professional coach, you are more likely to stay on track. That neither of those things are a guarantee that you're going to be successful. I started this video saying that 95% of people fail. Those stats are pretty staggering. So I'm not saying you're 100%, guaranteed to succeed if you have support or if you have a coach, but you are way more likely, exponentially more likely, if you've got some sort of accountability built into your life to help you keep going. Because I guarantee if you quit, you're not going to reach your goals, right? That's obvious to all of us. In order for you to get across that proverbial finish line, you got to keep moving forward. Now, the pace is a whole different thing. And, we can certainly talk about ways to speed it up. But when it comes to whether or not you're going to get there, you won't if you quit. So consistency is just absolutely the necessary element. Now, if you're looking for some consistency support from me, I do write a newsletter. I will put the link to sign up for that in the description. Perhaps getting an email in your inbox every so often that teaches you something new about weight loss. Basically, I make the newsletter and I just dump everything that I can think of about that I know about weight loss into it. If you think that might be helpful, that's something that you can try. I'll tell you, for me personally, the way I did it when I was going through my weight loss journey and trying to lose the weight is I marinated myself in support and in trying to understand how to keep this thing going. I read all the darn habit books. So yeah, that might be reading books, that might be listening to podcasts, that might be watching these YouTube videos, that might be reading my newsletter. Find a way to keep your head in the game and to keep it real and in front of your face so that you can keep going. Consistency is like a big part of it is just thinking about it regularly. Make good choices.